Well, hello, friends. It's really good to see you, and I really appreciate you taking time to be a part of this conversation. As you know, this is one of a series of conversations that I'm helping facilitate. That is kind of covering the spectrum of race and unity in the church and justice in our world. And we started this series talking about how we bring a biblical worldview to bear in how we understand the call for unity in the church and how we seek justice in the world around us. Last week, we talked about some of the local history in Orlando, some of the things that have contributed to where we are at presently in our current place in regards to race and justice in our city and even in our churches. This conversation is really about putting a face to things that can be big, scary topics of conversation in the cultures. This is about us being willing to share from our experience in a way that humanizes things that we can tend at times to want to hold at arm's distance. And so I'll be mostly facilitating this conversation, and I really appreciate and thank you in advance on behalf of the church that you're willing to be a part of this conversation, share a bit of your experience in life for the sake of good conversations continuing to happen. I'll go ahead and make some brief introductions here, and we'll jump in. Kyle, we'll start with you. Kyle and I have known each other for a long time, somewhere around your first trip to Sierra Leone back in the day, and he's been someone I've always respected and admired, and so I really appreciate you joining the conversation. You also have, in my opinion, one of my favorite kid names of recent years. You have a brand new baby named Roman. So tell us about you, your family, and some of what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Kyle Steele. Obviously, I live here. Well, I don't know if it's obvious, but I live here in Orlando, Florida. Met my beautiful wife, Amber. We have a son named Roman Christian Steele. And yes, the first time I met you, I was a little bit paranoid about Sierra Leone. So I called to get your wisdom and advice on it. But since being here in Orlando, it's been an interesting journey because I've been able to really find my role in this community and where I'm headed to. And in that process, it's hard to describe exactly what I do because I do quite a few things. So the easiest place for me to start is through like, what's the purpose or the banner that I'm flying over my life, which I call my purpose. That purpose is stated as to help people find and fearlessly move into the power of their unique story. And therefore, I use that banner to filter all my work through it. If my work is my work, I look at the things I do as tools to help me accomplish that overall mission or purpose over my life. And so that's whether it's a co-working space called the Credo Conduit, where I'm excited the fact that I get to work with a good friend of mine, a business partner, Ben Hoyer, who you know. Also, him and I work together on in a project with the Central Florida Foundation, City of Orlando, Social Enterprise Accelerator, where we're helping early stage companies create sustainable businesses that do positive social good. I'm also in the education space, and I do work with underprivileged children, especially around helping them improve their reading skills through coding. And then last but not least, I'm more or less now venturing into race and justice and really helping organizations figure out how to bring people together, Black, brown, white people together, to have these kind of hard conversations that the goal is that lead to healing and repair. And so that's kind of like the short of my story.
Yeah. And Michelle, good to see you. Michelle is a wonderful person, friend of our family. She taught our kids how to dance in the living room when she was last over for dinner, and I really appreciate that because that's not a skill I have. She's a Young Life leader and just, again, all around awesome person. Michelle, what should everyone know about you?
One, that I'm a dancer, and that's a little evident that I love being a community leader here and just in Central Florida at my church and just within the community. I'm the director of Light of Orlando Young Life, where we serve kids that live in vulnerable communities all around the city. And alongside that, developing leaders to go and let their love and light and their unique gifts that God has given them. I would say that I love to bring people's gifts out of them, help them discover who they are, and by activating like what God placed in them. And God has placed multiple gifts inside of us. So it's always a fun journey for us to kind of develop and see what God has in us. But then I also love having kids move in their purpose, for them discovering who the Lord is, what the word of God says about them, how they can live that out fully in their lives, and for them to disciple someone else. And so I get a chance to do that with college leaders, with young adults, emerging adults, middle school kids, and teen moms and kids with special needs. And so that's what I love doing, and working with single ministry. Yeah.
That's awesome. And David, if anyone in our church has significant involvement in jobs partnership over the years, we've gotten to know you well in that. But you have a lot going on in your life, so go ahead and introduce yourself a bit and some of your vast portfolio of awesome work. Oh, I think you're muted, David. I got you.
There we go. Sorry about that. Born and raised here in Orlando. I've been here all my life. I've been walking with the Lord since I was 11. So for the last 42 years, Jesus has been my best friend and my Lord and my Savior, and have tried to live my life to try to please him. I married my neighbor across the street. We've been knowing each other since age 3. My wife, April, and in 2 months, we celebrate 33 years of being together. We have 6 adult children, 4 sons, 2 daughters, and we have 6 grandchildren and 1 on the way. So got me we have 5 grandsons and 1 granddaughter, so I got another granddaughter on the way. So yes, Papa is very happy.
Nice.
Been in pastoral ministry since 1993, and been a volunteer chaplain with the sheriff's office since 2001. And as of 6 years ago, started a corporate chaplaincy business to provide inspirational wellness and soul care for employees and their immediate family members in the marketplace. So also I serve on the pastoral team of the Kingdom Church, TKC as it's known in the community. And so that's just a little bit about me.
Just a little bit. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate all of you again being a part of this conversation. We'll jump right in. So one of the things that I've noticed in the recent months, in particular, as graphic and horrible instances of inequity and injustice have kind of made national headlines, there's a conversation happening in our world about race and justice that I think is important to participate in. I think a lot of people, and this would be myself even not too many years ago, come to conversations about justice largely uninformed, and in some ways there's a question of are these things that I'm hearing about, are they real? Are they pervasive? Are they impacting people's lives? And oftentimes in our lack of diversity in relationships that we have, we don't have the opportunity to humanize some of the things that we're hearing in the world. And so maybe you can just and David, you've got the most years lived, and so maybe you can start us off just talking a little bit about your story and maybe how your experiences impact or not the larger conversations that are happening in our culture.
Yeah. Well, good. Appreciate that. My story is probably a little different than many. I would say, growing up in the Black community, and the community that I grew up in, as well as my wife, is a predominantly Black community called Tangelo Park, which I'm actually moved back into the old house I grew up in after Mom died 2 months ago. And so we keep life going on in this old house, and it's good to be here. But growing up in this neighborhood, I can't say that we did not see or experience bigotry or racism in any way. But what I'm grateful for is that being a PK, a preacher's kid, a pastor's kid, my dad, as well as my grandparents, we lived our lives, and they taught and led our whole lives from what I call a Christocentric point of view, a Christ-centered perspective, which is really loving God with your whole heart, soul, mind, and strength, and of course, loving your neighbor as yourself. And so, you know, learning that way, I lived that way and I led that way. And so times when, I remember serving in a, what do you call it, concession stand and at a football game. And I remember this man that came up and I said, "Sir, may I help you?" And he looked at me and said, "Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be." Me as a black person serving him as a white person. And I immediately, the hood wanted to come out. Let me tell you right now, it wanted to come out, but that Christ centeredness and that foundation really had to kick in. Well, I served him and gave him what he needed. Another incident took place where in our younger years with my wife, we was at a restaurant and it was obvious we was not getting good service and everybody around us was. And the only thing I could think of is that we looked different than everybody. We were black and everybody else was white. And when we left, though we were troubled, I put the largest tip on the table that person probably saw that night, or maybe even ever. It was also probably close as I came to getting a divorce, but that's a whole nother story. But anyway, I told my wife, the Bible says that we are not to be overcome by evil, but the way we overcome evil is by doing good. And Jesus said, "Bless the people that curse you, do good to them that despitefully use you, love them that hate you. And in doing so, you'll be called the children of my Father." And so that ethic has been ingrained in me from a youngster. And I have tried to live and serve that way. So much of that, I would say, brothers and sisters, has inoculated me from certain types of activism and certain types of response, because my response has always been, how does God see this individual and how would the Lord respond? And so because of that, much of my experiences has been different than what I hear that's maybe more pervasive in the Black community. So for me, it's all about leading and loving and serving like Jesus. And so in the current pandemic of racial unrest, for me, it's all about how do we bring the Jesus story in all of this and not get caught up in how the world is responding, but how do we respond in a Christ-centered way? So that's my life. That's how I've lived. And that's how I'm approaching the current situations now that we see ourselves in America.
Thank you. Kyle, share a little bit about your story.
Yeah, I was actually listening and I was like, man, that's really cool, because that's your experience and that's your story. And I was sitting here thinking to myself that I'm actually shocked that I have loving relationships with white people in general. I'm shocked that I belong to a Bible study that consists of 13 white men, right, who I love dearly. I'm shocked that I'm in business with a white man. I'm shocked that, I do life with John Parker. I'm actually shocked. And the reason why I'm shocked is because of my story is even before I was born. I've heard stories of my grandfather being, my mother and father traveling Mississippi with, my grandmother and grandfather traveling Mississippi with my mother and her 3 siblings and my pregnant grandmother, and being pulled off on the side of the road and him arrested and her being made to walk 15 miles in the hot Mississippi sun to the police station, then not allowed to go inside, but she had to wait outside with him, or wait for him outside unprotected. Those are stories that I grew up with, and I've heard around the table. In college, I went to the Virginia Military Institute, which is historically, which is a military school. It used to be all male in the South, steeped in Southern tradition. I was humiliated coming onto campus and forced as a Black man to walk across a field at the Battle of Newmarket, to run across a field as a sign of a right or initiation into what's called the rat system there. I had to do that, and I did it because I feared what would happen to me. And then it's also being there, I had a roommate who said to me flat out, like, how do you know my grandfather didn't know your grandfather? And I pulled my bayonet out off my rifle and pointed at him. I said, I'll kill you if you ever say that to me again. I didn't mean it, but that's how I felt. And then as a subsequent, I ended up getting kicked out of school because of that, because I was put in front of a committee of 5 white men who were actually friends of his and felt that I needed to be kicked out because of that. And I was an athlete. And then, you know, I go and I'm at spring break, right? And a white police officer from South Carolina weaponizes his 1,000-pound horse in the form of crowd control, but weaponizes it. And in the process of trying to defend oneself, you push away from the horse naturally. And he used that as an opportunity to say, you committed a felony, you battered a police officer. And so we're going to put you in the back of a police car as a young black college student and take you to jail. That was my experience, you know. And then I had an experience in Celebration, Florida, where I was just the wrong place, the wrong time, you know, clearly knew I didn't break the law. And a police officer stopped me and decided to put me out of the car and then bring 8 other police cars around me. So as a black man, I'm on the hood of a car in the middle of Celebration, Florida, watching people pass by me, right? So I say all that to say that I've had some of the craziest experiences with race, and specifically white men, that when I was listening to this, I was actually shocked. I was like, I can't believe that I'm mistrusting in relationship with white men, and what is it about me that helps me get there? So I think I know, and I'm in a good place, so no one has to walk around in fear of me. But that's my experience, and that's what informs my story. And now, being a father of a young black male, all the recent events really impact me, because I first think it's unfair that I have to talk to him about how to handle himself around police. Like, I think that's unfair, that I have to do that as a father rather than be talking to him about other things. And then I get to watch my wife, you know, try to process through these events, knowing that she has a black son and a black husband, and what that means in terms of our safety. Will we come home? You know, the risk and stuff. And so it's been a crazy period for me, to say the least, right? So,
Kyle, when you mentioned that, I thought about after the Philando Castile incident. I think that was the first George Floyd type of incident that was a tipping point for a lot of people, because it was in that situation where all the black fathers that I know started having that conversation. I remember typing a long text message and sent to all of my boys, if you get pulled over, this is what I need you to do, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And I sent it to my son, all of my sons. My oldest son looked at it, he said he had tears in his eyes, and he ended up copying and pasting it on his Facebook page. Said, this is what my dad just sent me. And it sparked a whole nother conversation with his generation of friends. And I just told him, I said, listen, I just need y'all to come home. And if a cop does something they're not supposed to do, we'll fight them in a different way. But don't try to do anything else but comply. And you say, yes, sir, no, sir. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. You do whatever you got to do to get home, and we'll take it from there. And I was serious about that. And man, I think at that moment, we all felt some kind of way in this country, like, that could have, Philando, that could have been us. Could have been any of my boys. It could have been anyone, because he did nothing wrong. So when you said that, man, I thought about that whole incident. So
yeah,
appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
And all of us all of us have children who are raising in the current context. Michelle, your kids being a horde of Young Life kids who I know you feel as much responsibility and parental love for them as any person. Talk a little bit both about your experience and some of what it's like to lead students, high school students, in the context we're in.
Yeah, I'm from upstate New York, and so Niagara Falls, Buffalo area, and I came down to Florida to go to Florida Agricultural University, Mechanical University. I'm a proud FAMU graduate, and so I had to shout that out. But where I grew up, everybody we had Native American or Indian American, Latinx, Canadian, French Canadian, like it's just a real big melting pot where I grew up. So I grew up. If we were in the same grade, we were together. So in high school, the baseball team, which was predominantly white, fought over the basketball team. Like if we went to a school that did have racism, we were just like, we grew up together. So I had a sense of unity in that aspect. But when I went to college and when I came into corporate America, that's where I experienced racism, being an emerging leader and being a woman and being an African American woman. That's where I really felt it from the white man, quote unquote. But I did have an experience in high school. I went to New York, upstate New York, well, New York City, and we would not on a youth group trip, and they would not let us stay there because we were Black. And so we had just got finished serving in the community around that hotel, and they did not let us stay there. We ended up having suing them and actually having a settlement with them. And I remember standing, and we were tired. We clearly had been serving. We had all our matching T-shirts on. We weren't disruptive, but the man did not want us to stay there. And I think I'm talking about a movie that I watched that happen, 60 years ago, but no, this is when I was 16 years old. And so I think about that experience and how I just internalized that. But then I liken it to what we were just talking about. I am Mama Michelle to a lot of students, and I have 5 brothers and no sisters. And so my heart goes out for Black men because I think about all of my brothers having their own separate experiences and my dad, and being really thankful for being raised in a Christian home where love trumps all. Like we're gonna love and we're gonna lead others to love, even in the midst of turmoil or hardship. And I've seen my parents model that out. And so I take a real hard stand of modeling that out to our kids. They go with us everywhere. We're always out in the community doing things. We're always hanging out. And there's always life situations that happen. And because they see myself and their other young life leaders able to lean into some tough and special racial tension, they're like, man, Miss Michelle, why did you decide to do it like that? Why did you say that? Man, I would have said this. And they begin to see this being modeled over and over and over again, where it begins to soften their hearts now that I know that my kids know what to do when they're pulled over by the cops. I know when girls get in situations and they might feel inferior because of a white male or just different circumstances. I'll share one quick brief story. If you guys know me or watch my social media, I travel a lot for work, and my kids kind of keep tabs on me. And so they're like, Miss Michelle, she went here. I guess they live vicariously through myself and the other young life leaders. And she went here. She was in Colorado. She was doing this. And she was in Malawi doing this. They feel like they're doing it as well. Well, I had a back-to-back schedule, and I just keep it going. I think I landed at midnight, and then I was back on Paramore Avenue the next day. And my parents were in town, and I was taking him through the area that we serve. And I was on my way to a community service project. And I was coming down Paramore, and I just saw some little dreads out the glimpse of my eye and a police officer. And my dad said, Michelle, I don't even know if you stopped your car. You just jumped out your car and ran because I knew it was one of my students. And so I got out the car, and I knew it because your kid's a mile away. Your kid's a mile away. And so I got to the officer, and I said, excuse me, officer, what's going on here? And he said, ma'am, I need you to step back. I said, no, I can't step back. I am his mentee / his mama / his auntie / his big sister. I can't step back, so I'm going to be here. And so he's a bigger kid, and he didn't have his license on him. He was riding a moped. So all boys love fast cars. It don't matter what color they are. And so he was riding a moped, and he was like, well, I don't believe he's 16 years old. And I said, well, no, here's a picture of him with flour, sugar, and honey all over his face, because we was just running around the camp a week ago. He is a 16-year-old boy, but in that moment, he was saying, I did everything that you told me to do, and I wasn't doing anything wrong. But in that moment, he was like, Ma, I said, yes, sir, no, sir. I gave him what I did have in my pockets. I tried to talk clearly, And I still was scared because he was bigger and it was a female and she was scared of him. And so until I got there to be able to de-escalate the situation and vouch for him, then he saw me in the moment dealing with her and said, no, ma'am, and being stern, because you're going to get this truth. I'm real big about truth and being honest. And so he got the chance to see that. And then he also said, man, Miss Michelle, like, Jesus, she be everywhere. She just dropped out of nowhere. She was in Colorado the day before, and I don't know where she came from. You wasn't you gone, but it kind of had this opportunity to mirror out what to do in that situation in the heat of the moment to make sure that, one, he got back home. First, that he got back home. And so those are just some of my experiences with the kids, being with it. We're in it with them, and that everything is going on constantly, that we have to be modeling what to do, how to be Christ-like, to know what justice means and what role that they have to play in it, so that we can start to create experiences for them to model out when we're not around.
Yeah, I want to kind of touch on what you just said. Like, in all of us, the stories that we're talking about, that's the piece that is the tiring piece, right? Where that on a daily basis, from the moment that I leave the house, or other Black men or people of color leave the house, especially as a Black male, bigger, beard, I can relate to that story, right? That my focus becomes around, how do I make people comfortable with my existence? And so that's whether or not I'm walking down the street and there's a white lady in front of me, and I know because of my presence, there's a heightened sense there. Whether I'm in a police situation where I'm talking and I have to do things in a certain way, or whether I'm in a grocery store and I have to make sure that I do stuff in a way so that, theft or loss prevention doesn't come and apprehend me. My whole existence becomes around, on a daily basis, how do I make people comfortable? And that's the piece that's exhausting, that can become very exhausting at times, because it's like, I just want to operate, right? I don't want to have to make people comfortable with my presence. And so I can understand how some can go completely radical, where they're like, you know what, I'm forget love. I'm about to be like Malcolm X before, when he was with the nation, right? And then, and so it's I need what I'm trying to articulate is, I just need white America to understand that it's exhausting at times to be Black in America, because we have to think about, how do we make you comfortable?
Well, from a female's perspective, I don't know if we just want to operate, or is it we want to be completely valued because I'm a woman and I'm a Black woman. And so whether I'm a speaker, so I speak different places, and I can walk into the room and you might not even make eye contact with me because I'm just a Black woman until I get up on stage. Right. Or I was at a church and I went to a conference, and a leadership conference, and they wanted to pray for all of the ministers. Well, I'm an ordained minister. So I prayed before I walked up, and I walked down, and what was happening was the men and their wives were walking down. And it was just me. I'm a single woman. And the person they didn't want to pray for me because I think they were waiting for my husband to come down the aisle. Now I wait for that too, but they were waiting for him. But it was this, are you in the right spot? Are you in the right place? And so for Black females and young Black females, it's like, are we valued while we're here? Because we're rising. Women are just really thriving, period. We've been thriving all along, but I work with young women and that are taking leadership positions and things. And so when they get into spaces, whether it's in the church or in the world, are they valued, or are they looked upon in a certain way just because they're female and an African-American female? So can we just be who God has called us to be and operate?
Right.
So Dave, you've raised a bunch of kids, have a bunch of grandkids. And you have this really rich value system that you bring to life in ministry, letting it not maybe glossing over negative experiences, but being fiercely committed to encountering negative experiences as a reflection of the character of Christ. What advice would you give young people of color who are angry at being unseen, unheard, misunderstood? What advice would you give?
That's a good question. I think about a conversation that took place the week of my mom's funeral, and the way my family dealt with mom's death. We so the funeral was that Monday, June 1st, and by Wednesday, June 3rd, we had checked in. The whole family had checked in a 15-bedroom house in Kissimmee, and it was like 40 people there, man. You know, from little ones all the way up to my generation now. We're the seniors of the family because everyone above us in our family is gone. So we are the elders and the patriarchs and the matriarchs of our family. And so that week we had a conversation because things were very fresh of what's going on during that time with my children and my nephews and nieces, you know, that millennial generation. And so one of my questions was, because if we're not careful, there is this looking back to the point of our detriment, you know. And I'm reminded of this verse, which of you, Jesus said, if you put your hand to the plow and look back, you're not fit for the kingdom. So we need to forge ahead. I give the example too that when we're driving a car, we have a bigger windshield than we do a rear view mirror. Our focus should be on the windshield and not on the rear view mirror. We only look there when we need to, but we keep our focus straight ahead. And so one of the things I asked my sons and my nephews, I said, because a number of them have completed or are going through college right now. I said, has anybody hindered you, any of you all, from going to college, especially because you're Black? No. All of you are driving cars. Were anybody stop you from getting a car because you were Black? No. Yeah. As long as your credit good and you got some money and you show the ability to pay, it was able to get, okay. We all live in different places. Are any of us living in a neighborhood because we were restricted from going to another neighborhood because we were Black? No. And I went through that line of questioning to let them see, this is not the 60s. This is not the 50s. This is not the 70s. Because my parents and my grandparents' generation experienced more of that. And part of my generation too, you know, even though we were shielded from a lot of that. But there were a lot of restrictions on where you could go to college, which is why HBCUs exist. You know, historically Black colleges exist originally because opportunities at other colleges didn't exist for Black people. So Black folks had to create their own educational institutions and insurance companies and banks because of redlining and blockbusting and all those things that kept Black folks out of the so-called American dream. But I wanted my nieces and nephew and my children to say, okay, we have come a long way and we need to celebrate the fact that we are not where we were. We had 8 years of a president that didn't look like all the other presidents, right? We have come a long way, but I want everybody to acknowledge, because I know a lot of my white brothers and sisters in conversation, they would be like, well, you know, we've come a long way and we had a Black president. Yeah, but I need you to acknowledge the fact that we have a long way to go. So it's not an either or, it's we've come a long way, but yes, we got a long way to go. Now let's celebrate how far we've come and build upon that to say, because what I'm seeing is to people today resurrecting Martin Luther King and his tactics to fight in a Joshua generation, right? God, one of the things that God told Joshua specifically, I want you to understand, Joshua, Moses is dead. He is dead. And yes, he led by a staff. The way you're going to lead is by a sword. Your leadership is going to be different. Your tactics are going to be different. And what I'm seeing today, now this is just my opinion, is that today's issues require a different tactic, but we're resurrecting old tactics that died with a different generation. And so for me, it's how do we fight today using and building upon the Moseses of yesterday, but understanding that God wants to do something different on today. So, you know, we had that conversation and it was enlightening to them. It was like, yeah, we have come a long way. Yeah, ain't nobody stopped me from going to college because I'm Black, or buying a car, or living where I want to live, or going shopping where I want to shop. Because everything that we just went over, there was a time where us, your great-grandparents in particular, and your grandparents and their generation, they could not, but we can. We have a long way to go, but we have come a long way. And I would say to get to where we need to go, we must be careful, in my opinion, to not try to resurrect old tactics in a different generation that requires a new thought, a new way of thinking, and new tactics. That's just Dave Outing and where I'm at with it.
Thank you for that. Kyle or Michelle, do you have anything that you would add or contribute to that part of the conversation?
Like, man, so I agree with you about looking forward and using different tactics, and what I want to say is like I would say add to that is just simply because of that's not the kind of the racism or injustice isn't overt, right? I could still go to certain neighborhoods or do certain things. There's still systems around me. Like, I don't know what I lose unless I know it, right? And so yes, there has been impact of the past on my life, right? The redlining, that's a real thing, right? Like, homes and the ability to build generational wealth, and the fact that home prices were what they were, didn't allow Black families to accumulate wealth through property, right? Like, in terms of that, at the rate of white Americans, and that has profound impact today. And so I think that my view about the past is that the past can be incredibly healing. Like, I don't want individuals to be victims of the past or to take a victim mentality, but I think that we have to reckon with the past, and wrongs are wrongs. And if I'm honest, like the original sin of America, which is slavery, and the fact that this nation was built off of the backs of Black and people who work for free, and the realization is that would this country be what it could be if you can eliminate all of that overhead in terms of labor from your balance sheet and essentially get it for free. And so I feel like that needs to be reconciled, right? Like, and be repaired. I think that's a real conversation. It's not holding me back from having meaningful relationships with people who look at me. But I think that the past is very informative, and it also it has an impact on who I am today. And trying to explain, like, why am I like the way I am? I have to look back, because that tells a story about the stage I came in and my circumstances and why I behave. And it's important that white folks understand this too, because it's not that just happened in the past, so you should be okay. Like, no, the past has, like, look, you've been divorced for 10 years and you're still trying to deal with that, right? I'm not talking to any of y'all, but I'm just saying, like, there are people who had stuff happen to them in the last 10 years or 5 years, and they still not over it, right? A girlfriend broke up with them. So imagine a race of people who've had something happen to them over the last 400 years, and that in a way that is evil, right? Enslaving people, claiming that they're property, treating them as they're less than, harming them, killing them, and then watching a nation build up and become prosperous because of those individuals. Like, that matters I feel like matters in the conversation. I want people who are white to understand, no, this is real, and it has impact on the systems and the people that you engage with on a daily basis. And so that's all I would add to that.
I would add just our current climate and our current situations. I think about today, our kids, our peers, our coworkers, we experience microaggressions. of racism. So it might not be outlandish with this this repetitive microaggression, whether it's at school, whether it's at work, that our kids are experiencing. So how do we build up our kids and ourselves to be able to deal with that, to put a stop to what happened in the past, so that we can flourish in the future? Then I also think about our current situation, and I think about interminority racism, where racism against people of color that can perpetuate it from the majority culture. And what does that look like? Because we know that 30, 40 years from now, that it will be the minority majority, where the minorities will be the majority, but it will be a mixed race. So how well do we do well with each other, or people of color, and just the biases that we have against each other, and how does that play out these 20, 30, 40 years, especially when our kids are biracial? They're Asian and Black and Mexican and white and Indian American and all of these things. So what does that look like? How do we do that now? Because that's a real thing as well. The interminority racism that happens, we'll all gang up against the white man. We're gonna do that together. But what does that look like as we're growing and to be all of these people of color in the next 20, 40 years? What does that look like? And we have to do that work now. We have these personal experiences that we're having internally. How does God reconcile that? What does God say about race? What is God's heart about it? During all of this time, you all are community leaders. We had plenty of conversations with our white friends, or what books do I read? What do I do? And I was like, the Bible. Let's look at the Bible, because there's passages. We need to know God's heart about what he says about racism. We need to know our own experiences, and whether you're Black, white, Puerto Rican, Asian, Hispanic, how has your experiences been reconciled with the word, so that when we do go out and we do have these experiences, we're able to have that light, love, wisdom, truth, and knowledge and discernment to be able to do that. Because if we don't do that, are we perpetuating things that came from our past and that letting have the word of God have the final word on what that looks like? And those are things that we can be talking about currently, or doing currently right now in the midst of that.
That's awesome. Well, Michelle, that's a great final word for this conversation. There's so much more I want to talk about. And in fact, let's do this. If I can get a few more minutes, we're already 7 minutes over our intended time. But we'll just call this bonus round. And I really do believe that that fixing what's broken, the wrongs of the past, the wrongs of the present, it hinges on one, the church's involvement. Like, right, Michelle, like you said, we've got the answer in Jesus, but also pivots on the diversity of our relationships. If we're just dealing with issues and not people, if it's stuff we talk about on a large scale, but it doesn't intersect with our church life, our dinner table, things like that, then we miss opportunity. And so all of you have talked about your past in terms of the diversity or lack thereof of your relationship. David, you grew up very much like in a very Black context, but always encouraged to model Christ likeness in every interaction. Kyle, you had disincentive to engage in meaningful diverse relationships. Just talk a little bit about why you're putting the work into diverse relationships with people like me and others as well, and where's the hope in that for you? And just take a minute each, because we are over time.
Yeah, I mean, I could jump off really quickly on that. For me, the most important thing is when I look back at Genesis, and I think of when God created the world, it said, let us make man in our image, or in our likeness. And so, in remembering that, I realized that every face, whether it's Black, brown, white, whatever color it is made in the image of God, and that's important for me to reckon with and understand that. And to affirm that, right? Because of that, it doesn't give me an excuse to disengage people who don't look like me or look different than me, because the realization is that every individual, whether, like I said, if they look different than me, they show me a very unique image of who God is, and as a result, and He made them, and as a result, they have extreme value. And so, And so that's for me, that's what's I think is important for me to realize and others to realize. And then the intentionality is also understanding that, you know, you have to work at this, right? Like you have to be uncomfortable with this and uncomfortable and be okay with uncomfortable. One of the things I've been talking about is trying to get away from the term safe space, because the term safe space has different connotations cross-culturally, right? For white folks, safe space means it's about comfort, right? It's about creating spaces that make them feel comfortable. And I often have to tell, you know, people who are white, you know, and say in these conversations, like, be okay, be brave with being uncomfortable. So the term I'm using is brave space. Be brave with being uncomfortable, because these are uncomfortable conversations, but these conversations and the messiness can bring the most beauty out of them. So be uncomfortable with that. And so be okay. Like, you're going to hear things that you don't agree with. You're going to experience things you don't agree with, but stay there. And the reason why you can stay there is because we can recognize the dignity of all people. And for Black folks, it's never been a safe space to talk about race. Like, even in this conversation, as a Black person, you're weighing the consequences of speaking openly and candidly about your feeling around race and racism. What will it cost you, right? And so for us, it's about being brave to become vulnerable, to stay vulnerable, to have these things, to be able to say this. Because unless white folks are being brave and staying in that conversation, even though it's uncomfortable, and Black people are choosing to be brave and to remain vulnerable, until those things happen, we can't really come around this way, this kind of topic in a way that creates meaningful change, and we can empathize with each other, and together mutually come up with solutions or have a conversation that help each other heal, and also help each other mutually repair any damage or harm that has been done because of unjust systems or because of racism.
Thank you. Go ahead, Michelle. You look like you're ready to talk.
Quickly, I was popping to my mind as I'm asking the Lord what to share. I saw a young white pastor when everything was happening in May, and he has just been an advocate and just really been able to lean into this space as just social justice. And someone asked him, what made you be like this? What gave you the passion for this? He said, it was my parents and the people around me. He said, he's younger than I am, so I'm 40. He's younger than I am. He said him and his mother was walking, and she saw someone be racist towards a Black person. And she said to him, before I go handle this situation, I want to point out that is not Jesus, and that is not the Lord, and that is not what Christianity is about. So you stay right here, but I wanted to make sure you saw clearly what this is. Now I'm going to go handle this situation. Now, she sounded like a Black mama, but she was a white woman who did something. And your something may not be handling that situation right then and there, but as we're having conversation, as you're beginning to develop deeper thought about what this means, what God says about it, and where do you fit into it, lean into it and don't let it just pass by. Don't let it do something. You got to handle the situations that you see around you and let the Lord lead you in those conversations. So as I want to go past conversations and what does it look like practically every single day. I just want everyone just to be able to handle it. I'm going to go handle that situation. It might be whether you're bringing some moms together. It might be uniquely to the person that God created you and your gifts, but handle the situation. Now, I'm more keen to be like the mama. But what does that look like for you? And that's part of the process of God just working in and through you with his word and empowering you and say, love conquers light every single time. Love and light conquers every single time. And what can I do about it? And what role do I have?
Thank you. All right, David, final word.
Well, you know, for me, I thought about like a few months ago where I certainly feel and believe that it was the Holy Spirit that impressed this upon me. And I preface that because I'm not one of those that say, well, you know, God told me this and God told me that, because it may not be God. But when I was trying to understand what was going on, this is what I heard in my spirit, that there's only two choices that we have, and it's the same two choices that the people had almost 2,000 years ago. Standing before Pilate and standing before the religious people and before the mob was a man named Jesus of Nazareth. And standing next to him, according to the NIV, in Matthew 27:16, the NIV calls him Jesus Barabbas. And Jewish Bibles calls Barabbas Jesus Barabbas. And his name means son of the Father, Barabbas. And so you had Jesus, son of the Father, and Barabbas, Jesus, son of the Father, two sons of the Father standing in front of the people, and God gave them a choice. Now, Barabbas, he was a protester, a seditioner, a murderer, a thief. He did all of that, and he went after the government in order to try to change the Roman government. But this other fellow, right, named Jesus, he didn't go after the government. He said, hey, my kingdom is not of this world. I'm coming to bring a different mindset. And he didn't go after Rome. In fact, because he didn't go after Rome or the government, people thought he was not the Mashiach or the Messiah. And so when the choice came, do you choose the Prince of Peace and his methodology of just loving people where they are, crossing ethnic lines like he did when he talked to the woman at the well? Not only did he cross ethnic lines, he crossed gender lines as well. So he's speaking to a woman. He's speaking to a woman of a different race. He gives the story of the Good Samaritan. So Jesus has this method of just dealing with people where they are, going where they are, right, and bringing in the kingdom. But then there's the Barabbases. His method is, let's go after the government. Let's protest. Let's do all those things. And so when the choice came, the people said, including the religious people, give us Barabbas. We want his methodology. We want him because he seems to be the one that's going to bring change. And what shall we do with Jesus? We're going to crucify him. And in this moment, a few months ago, I felt like the Holy Spirit was impressing upon me. It's the same choice the church and the world and the country has today. We either going to choose Christ and the way he did things, or we're going to choose Barabbas. And I'm afraid that I'm seeing more of the church choose the way of Barabbas than the way of Christ. And so for me, I live my life as a solution. John's partnership and the rescue mission and Grace Medical and all these other organizations that are serving the least, the last, the lowest, and the lost. That's being a part of the solution. I can't change Tallahassee, and I can't change Washington no more than Jesus tried to with Rome. But what I can do is bring about the kingdom in everybody that I come in contact with and use the Lord's methods in doing it. That's how I lead. That's how I live. And that's my response.
I like that. So, live my life as a solution. Those are powerful words.
Absolutely.
All right, friends. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I appreciate so much your investing in this conversation. I appreciate your friendship.
Yeah,
love you, man. Appreciate you, bro.
Thank you.
Yeah, we got to get on the phone. You and John talk about you and Amber. I mean, y'all other people, y'all have to join us too if you want.
All right, y'all.